Welcome, everyone. We'll get started in about 1 minute with Dr. Shelley Wigley leading our session. Go ahead and put in the chat what department you're in, if you're able to access chat. Okay, I think we're ready, Dr. Wigley.
Okay, thank you, Peggy. We want to welcome everyone to this session of our Sterile Summer Series, Teaching Smarter, Not Harder. This one focuses on teaching in-person classes. So welcome, and we hope you all enjoy today. I just want to start by introducing the CERTL staff. We have Nikisha Brown, we have Beth Fleener, Peggy Simonson, and myself. And then we also have the CERTL AI Teaching and Learning Hub. We know that AI is a huge topic right now for both faculty and students. So we do have a Learning Hub on the CERTL website where you can find all things AI to help you in your teaching journey. And then we also wanted to remind you all about our CERTL AI teaching brief. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Peggy? We hope everyone will sign up.
Yeah, sure. Our team puts this together. We realize that AI is changing so fast, we don't want to wait to get information out. We're curating quotes from faculty, and we are also providing resources to free trainings that you can do. One of the ones we're highlighting is Google Career Certificate in AI. I think I said it wrong, but you get the idea. I'm working through it myself. It's a cutting edge Google AI Professional Career Certificate that I believe your students will also have access to, and it's through Coursera Career Academy. UT System pays for it. We have access to it. The great thing about the Career Academy, the Google AI course, is you get 3 free months of Google AI Plus. So you get, it's not their premium, but it's like a step up from the basic Gemini. So I'm looking into that as I'm taking this Career Academy because they give you this elevated AI tool in Gemini as a sandbox for you to practice in. And I'm learning a lot. So I recommend that.
Awesome.
We'll put the link in the chat.
Awesome, thank you. And that course is completely free to faculty and students
Yes,
right now, so take
yes.
advantage of it. Okay, so today what we hope the outcomes will be for all of you, understand the importance of course pacing and structure for in-person teaching, apply teaching strategies that reduce workload, also apply teaching strategies that enhance student learning, and of course we would love to see you commit to implementing one new interactive teaching strategy when you begin, whether you're teaching now this summer or if you're teaching in the fall. So okay, so we're going to get started here with, this is our kind of our theme today, just say no to the sit and get approach. And I stole this from Beth, who says this a lot. I love this. The sit and get, where you just go and you listen to someone lecture for like 50 minutes. So we're trying to get away from that because it enhances learning, but it also will reduce workload for you as well as an instructor. So instead, like I said, we want you to reduce your workload and also support student learning in the process. So Beth shared this with me and she might want to chime in on it, but this is kind of how in-person learning is structured. Do you want to talk about this a little bit, Beth?
Absolutely. Okay, so this is something, and I work with graduate students and programming in that space and future faculty type of space. And so this is a learning kind of structure on how to teach. Now the times can vary, but it should always include an introduction of some presentation, practice, and a closure. This helps with the pacing of your course. Again, if you have a 50-minute class, your introduction can be like 5 minutes. It can be 20 minutes, depending on if you're introducing your content. But it should really contain these 4 basic elements in your lesson or your instruction. So that's really what this is. And we're going to spend a little time talking about this, Shelley, if you want to get started on it. So the first part is the introduction. How do you get your students? They're coming into your class. What are you doing to get them hooked into your instruction? So share what you do to hook your students in. And no idea is wrong. And that's the best part of in-class teaching. I know when I teach my math methods courses, I vary it. I've seen people do things that have a song. The students put a survey and they have a new song that starts. I have had questions. Again, I teach new incoming future teachers. They usually ask, what is it like to teach in the classroom in a public education setting? And you just tell them right out. Do you do a video? Do you do a joke? Do you do a me? What do you do to hook your students? So I'm going to give you a few minutes to think about that and just drop it in the chat, because we're here to share resources and ideas with each other.
I love sharing. Yes, we want to hear what you all do so we can learn from each other.
So what do you do to hook your students, to get them curious? Do you bring in an object and put it on the, because again, we're talking in-person class. You bring something in and they're like, what's this about? What are we going to do? What do you do to hook your students? Okay. If you can't try the chat, we do have some ideas. If you don't know, that's okay.
And I'll share mine. One that I do a lot is I teach a crisis communication class, and so we talk a lot about current events. And so I will show a video that's relevant to either a topic that, we just discussed or something that we're going to discuss. Again, I just find that students, you get their attention, they get more engaged early in the core or in the session if there's a video. They like movement. So.
All right. All right. Okay, so I think on the next slide, we do have a couple examples and we can talk about it. Okay, so these are some types of hooks that you can do for an introduction. Again, these are very low stakes. You don't have to grade any of these. All right. Shelley was talking about media. Do you bring props? I mean, if you're doing a class, maybe you have skits or, period clothing, stories, games, experiments, puzzles, images, graphics, all of those things. You can have something up and you're coming in and you're like, oh, what are we going to do? Spikes that curiosity. So they want to engage with you. So the hooks are very, very important. You don't want them to come in and sit and be passive. You want to engage that curiosity. Live polls, surveys, excellent, Bonnie, all of those things. And this is not an exhaustive list. There's so many things out there. I mean, even if you're struggling, you can even have AI kind of give you some suggestions if you need that. Yeah. So a hook, an introduction, again, time-wise can be very, very short, can be very, very long, especially if you're doing a new concept. Maybe you have a little bit longer hook to really spark their curiosity. Okay, so those are some ideas of them. Oh, go ahead, Shelley.
I was just going to say, from my personal experience, I've noticed, students really like giving their opinions on things or contributing. So also the polls work and surveys work really well to kind of get the students engaged, whether it's, I know some people use Mentimeter or Kahoot, so there's all different ways to do that. So.
Yep, cartoons. Yeah, anything humor, memes, GIFs. I've had those before too. I mean, so those are anything that just gets their interest sparking. And so that's really what that introduction is all about. Okay. All right. So here's the next part. Then if you're an in-person class, how are you presenting this information? How do you present this information to your students? Okay. Are you what we refer to as lecture? Are you doing demonstrations? How are you presenting information? Again, the time can vary. You can spend, again, if you have a 50-minute class, you can take 20 minutes to present. You can take 10 minutes to present. You can take 40 minutes to present. So again, that element time-wise varies. So how do you present information? Most people here in higher ed are typical, they present as a lecture formats. So there are types of lecture formats that you have to consider. And Shelley, I think we have that on the next slide. So we have what we refer to as a semi-formal lecture, the lecture discussion, the interactive lecture, and the Socratic type of lecture. And then obviously demonstrations. Demonstrations are a little bit more for the labs and things like that. And so what is the difference between all of that? I know, Shelley, we had that. This is just the conversations that I actually have with the grad students because they just think lecture is lecture. You know, there are many, many types of lectures. All right. Short and formal. All right. So sometimes our lecture is do you lecture the whole time and then you allow the students to ask questions at the end of the 20 minutes, 40, whatever it is. Or do you have a lecture discussion where you talk a little bit, then they ask questions, maybe they do a little activity, and then you come back and you teach a little bit more. That's how I used to teach my math. When I teach math in public education, I would have a little burst of instruction. Then they would do something and then we go back and we come back. So it helps stick in there. So those are types of things. So again, if you take, like I taught a 33-hour class on a Monday night, you can't lecture for 3 hours. I don't want to talk for 3 hours. Okay. So you help break up this time. Concept maps. Absolutely. You're building a concept map during that. You go back and forth as you work through that. Demonstrations, again, are a little bit more for lab-based types of things where you're modeling. I actually incorporated a demonstration again with my math methods, how we using the manipulatives and things like that. So how do you present? There's a lot more research in this area, but how do you present this information? Okay. And then the next part of presenting is then how do you have them practice? How do you have them learn that? It's a research out there called an I do, we do, you do. Okay, so I'm going to do this, we're going to do this, and then you're going to do this. So it's that practice part of I introduce something to you, we're going to do this together, we're going to learn through this concept, and then you're going to be able to do this together. This I do, we do. So do you allow them time to apply this knowledge, talk about it, interact with it? And so that's a great idea. Like the concept maps is a great idea. Shelley, I think there's some other activities that we talked about.
There we go.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So these interactive, and this goes back to the interactive lecture. So you teach a little part, you have them, we do activity together, and then you come back and you build it with the next part and you keep building it. So do you have debates? Think pair share. Project-based learning, case studies. Do you have conversations with that? Quick writes, all of those little exit ticket things where they're interacting with your content with questions. So you give them instruction. Again, you do not want to talk the whole time. By having them interact with each other, you are relieving some of the extra burden upon yourself. You're giving them time to learn from each other. So these interactive activities, again, based on your time, you can have that practice time really, really long. You can have it really, really short, depending on what you're teaching and how you're flowing with the class. And so, again, this is not exhaustive. There's so many ways that you can have interactive that can be very informal. I think pair share is very informal. You turn to your partner and you have a conversation. You don't need to grade this, but you are checking their understanding. But things like a case study, you might have to go find that or present some things like that. A debate, you have to have maybe some prompts or things like that. So maybe a little prep on that part, but then they're doing that. And then when you wrap up your lesson, okay, again, this whole time, you're pacing your time. When you wrap up your lesson is usually how do you close it? How do you end your lesson? The time's up. All right, guys, see you next week. That is actually, when I used to work with student teachers in the field, that is the hardest thing to do is you just taught all this information, but you need to put a bow on it. You need to close it. You need to solidify it in their head. All right. If you let them leave, it kind of becomes a loose end. So you always have to close it up, and it doesn't need to be a formal assessment. Well, it can be if you're closing a unit and you have to give an assessment, but it can be as simple as an exit ticket. It can be as simple as thumbs up, thumbs down. It can be a simple thing as just your muddiest point, exit tickets, a Kahoot game, Jeopardy, a journal, a note card that you don't even have to grade. I used to have exit tickets and they would hand out like, what question you have? What are some things like that? Anything that you can close that, maybe the 3-2-1 is 3 things you learned, 2 questions you will have, how you're going to apply it, things like that. Anything that you can do to wrap that up. It can be 5 minutes. It can be longer depending on your class time. And these closure activities are really good, helps put that whole thing together for your lesson. And so you have to be intentional in building those in your lesson plan to do that. And those can be fun. And so what is something they learned that surprised them? Absolutely. Is there's a question, what is the muddiest point, which is what is the one thing that you're confused about? Because student X may have no problem with it, but student B over here is struggling with it. And that just helps you as an instructor figure out, okay, so I need to re-emphasize this point or maybe not this point, clarify that. Games, the students always love that. Journal, reflection, any of those things. Those are really strong, good face-to-face things that they leave your classroom with a positive note after that. So those are the types of examples that actually when you write a lesson plan, those are the 4 elements you should have in a lesson plan. Okay.
That's great.
I know
Thank you,
that
Beth. Yeah.
You're welcome. I know I talked a lot, but if you have
No,
more
you're good.
questions,
You're
you
good.
reach out.
Can we mention too about, I know that some people, I know grading is the bane of my existence. That's the only part of teaching I do not enjoy. I'm sure others feel that same way, but one way that you can implement grading and make it not so taxing is by, we've talked about this a little bit, I think, like an exit ticket would just be like a, check off participation kind of thing. So make it easier on yourself to where students still get credit, that they're learning, but you're not full-blown grading. Do you want to talk about that just briefly before we turn it over to Bonnie?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
As an instructor, especially when you're teaching, especially if you're teaching a large classroom and things like that, you don't need to grade everything. And this was something that I learned when I used to teach in public education way back then when I would teach over 60 students at a time for math. I don't need to grade everything. You need to be just a little smarter in what you're doing. So there's like an informal, like participation. I just need to see that you did it, maybe see what's going on, see where your thinking is, but you don't necessarily need to have to spend all your time grading it. And if you do have something that requires a little bit more grading, consider doing that as part of a practice activity where the students are peer to peer, maybe working on a gallery walk or doing where they give the feedback to each other, and it relieves a little bit of the burden on you. Now, obviously, you still have to you're the professor of record, you still need to make sure the students are knowing their content, but you don't need to grade everything that you do during the class time.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
That's that participation thing. Okay. Are you actively participating and engaging in my class? And that's usually just a line item that I have in my grade book. And that's how I do that. So that's it. And again, I'm giving you the release to not have to grade everything.
Yes, yes.
Don't need to grade everything. So,
awesome.
All right.
And also we have more examples. This is not exhaustive list of all of these that we can either put in the chat or we'll email to everyone after the workshop. So, okay, let's turn it over to our guest speaker, Dr. Bonnie Laster. She is Associate Professor of Instruction in the Department of Psychology, College of Science. And she's got some great information about how to make your teaching more engaging while also working smarter, not harder, saving time and energy. So I'm going to turn it over to Bonnie.
Hi, can everyone hear me all right? Everyone good?
Yes.
Thumbs up?
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
All right. Fantastic. Well, I'm going to talk about 2 things today. I'm going to talk about how I incorporated small learning communities into one of my large lecture classes. And I'm also going to talk about book club, and which is kind of a variation on using small groups. So when I first came to UTA, I came from a small private liberal arts institution where my class size was anywhere from like 30 to 36. Here at UTA, my class size is almost always over 100. There are some semesters I have anywhere between 500 and 800 students. So I quickly noticed a lot of the things I utilized at my previous institution, didn't translate well to massively large lectures. However, maybe you all notice what I've noticed with large lecture classes. On one hand, large lecture classes can be fantastic for students because there are so many other students there, and they can get to know people, and they can get to know a variety of people. On the other hand, it can be easy for students to feel lost in a large lecture hall. So I came up with the idea of incorporating small learning communities within a large lecture for three reasons. First off, I noticed that sometimes think, pair, shares can be limiting. Now, I am a huge fan of think, pair, share. In my classroom, we call them the people ups. I'll introduce something, I'll say, grab your people around you, discuss this. Well, not everyone is comfortable, even though I have them introduce themselves on the first day of class. Not everyone continues to show up for class. Some students prefer to hide. I also wanted to do things like I wanted to encourage attendance. And I wanted to do that through peer pressure, basically. Yep, I did. I wanted to get peer, I shouldn't say peer pressure, peer encouragement to kind of get some camaraderie there, to encourage each other to attend. Finally, I wanted to instill a sense of belonging and psychological safety in a large lecture hall. Yes, peer accountability. That's probably a much better way to say it rather than peer pressure. So what I did was I utilized one of my classes, my social and personality development class. And I decided to put the students into small learning communities, small groups. So how it worked was the very first week of class, I had my students do a brief survey. Now, this included everything from where do you normally prefer to sit in lecture, to is there anyone you, and of course this was confidential, is there anyone you would be uncomfortable with being in a group with? And then I was able to kind of drill down on some of their responses. So for example, if you prefer to sit in the front, is this because of habit? Is it personal preference? Is it for visual purposes, auditory? I ask things like, do you have, or how important is the seating preference to you? Do you feel strongly that you have to sit in the back? Do you feel strongly that you need to sit in the front of the class? Then I did things in the survey like how comfortable are you talking in a small group? What role do you naturally take on in group work? How consistently do you attend class and so forth? So I wanted to go beyond group projects. I wanted to go beyond group projects because most of us have had like a group assignment from time to time, but I wanted to put together groups where kind of like a PLC, they would be together for the duration of the semester and serve as accountability partners, study partners, and so forth. So taking the survey results, I kind of did the magic with Excel as far as, filtering out where people were going to sit for the most part, because the important part of the small learning groups wasn't just, oh, hey, here are other people in your group, find them, get together at your leisure. No, it was we're having assigned seating by group. And that is where ChatGPT came into play. So Shelley, going on to the next slide. I asked ChatGPT to organize everyone into balanced groups. Now, of course, for confidentiality, when I inputted this information to chat, I had students identified by numbers that I knew. I didn't like upload everyone's, name and identification into chat, but taking in to account preferences, what type of roles they take on, if they were uncomfortable, being in a group with someone, etc. I fed all that into chat and said, yes, codes and numbers, and said, okay, can you organize my folks into groups, and can you create a seating chart? So I then gave chat information about the seating in the lecture hall, complete with how many rows, how many seats per row. I let chat know I wanted them to be seated in pods. So rather than, okay, group one, you're in the entire row of group one. Because in a large lecture hall, if there are 6 or 7 students in a row, they can't talk to each other. So I said, can you make them in pods? So like for group one, some of the students in group one will be in the first row. Some of the students in group one will be in the second row, so they can kind of work together in their little pod. And chat did that for me. And it was fantastic, because then not only was it, okay, here's how you could divide up the groups into different pods, then chat was able to say, okay, this, again, using codes and numbers, it was student 36 is going to be seated in row 12, seat 35. Here are their group mates, and so forth. So the seating chart was disseminated to all of my students, and I'd given them a heads up at the beginning of the semester. Said, okay, don't freak out. That is literally how I prefaced it. I said, don't freak out. And I made them promise me that they wouldn't freak out. You're going to be in groups, but it's not a group project. And y'all, hey, well, let me get your involvement real fast. Can I ask y'all to share, like, with an emoji, or let me know in the chat, how does it go over when you tell students they're going to be in a group project with peers? How does that normally go over with them? Are they super excited about this? Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yes. And Kim, I saw your hand raised. Did you have a comment, or were you just saying, like, yeah, I've done this?
I was trying to hit the down thumb and hit raised hand instead.
Oh, okay. Okay. So yeah, not everyone is a big fan of group projects. So the first thing I did was say, it's not a project. And that alone, kind of, settled things down a little bit. Let's go on to the next slide, and we'll talk about like what the groups did. If they're not doing a group project per se, what were they doing? So again, when I would talk about the groups, I'd be talking about them as small learning communities. And I would tell them, we're going to sit in our small learning communities. You can study, you can do in-class activities. So since they had their assigned seating in their small learning communities throughout the semester, they did stuff like you see on the slide there. However, let me say, I started off with a lot of get to know you questions. A lot, because we have to establish trust before we can have a small learning community. That trust, that willingness to be vulnerable has to be there. So many get to know you questions. Everything from, if you could have a student superpower, what would it be? To I would come up with stuff like sloths cute or creepy? Why? I had one time, it was like, if you could fight any animal and win, what would it be and why? And I would give them example. I kind of just want to punch a kangaroo. I'm not really sure why, but I just want to see if I could do it. So some of the questions were just absolutely off the wall. But then some of them, of course, were what was the best class you've ever had and why? What's the most challenging thing for you as a student, etc. Let me tell y'all, the feedback was so I did a lot of this at the beginning of the semester. The feedback from my students was, can you start every class session with something like this? Because even toward the end of the semester, when the groups had been intact for a while, they still really thought those questions were fun. And some of them would come up with their own. Like one group I heard them discuss their discussion was showering, morning or night. Defend your answer, and then they just had this whole debate on personal hygiene. And they just really enjoyed those type of get to know you questions. Now, as far as what we did in the small learning communities, I would give them a lot of busy work. A lot of busy work. Now, usually when we think of busy work, we think of stuff that is just to keep them occupied, and it doesn't really amount to much learning. However, our busy work was I would give them case studies. So this was a social and personality development class. I would give them a case study about a 16-year-old who was trying to forge her personal identity. And I'd say explore the theories that might guide her development or something like that. We did review activities. Sometimes I would say, our first exam is coming up, get together in your community, come up with 3 potential exam questions you think would be appropriate. So the groups remained together the entire semester. I gave them the option to decide how to communicate. So I realized not every group probably wanted to give personal phone numbers or anything like that. So I said, if you want to communicate through email, great. If you want to do a group me or a WhatsApp or however you want to communicate is up to you. And one thing that I did early on, I think that also helped, was I had them do a cultural assignment where they put together a little visual presentation of who they are, their cultural upbringing, and of course, in a social and personality development class, it was appropriate, for the class, what they were studying. So I don't know if that would be applicable to every subject, but if you could figure out a way, to make it relevant, they really appreciated that assignment because they got to know their classmates even better. Going on, let's talk about how students responded to the small learning communities. Overwhelmingly, they thought it was interesting. That was the term that came out a lot. It was interesting because most of them had been like in lab groups or again like group work or something like that, but they had not been in an established learning community for an entire semester. Some of the themes that emerged, I did feedback twice. Once about mid-semester, I asked for their feedback, what was going well, what could be improved upon, and then at the end of the semester. Themes that were reported, students became much more comfortable asking questions. And in case you're wondering, how does this relate to low lift? Because it sounds like this is a lot of work. I can't remember if I mentioned this or not, y'all. I had 147 students in this class. So at first glance, doing a seating chart, purposefully putting people into groups, that's a lot of work. It is a lot of work up front. However, it then runs itself. So there were so many times when I would like lecture for a little bit, maybe 15 minutes or so, I'd turn it to them and say, discuss. They would answer each other's questions because I could hear them, well, what did she mean by this? Or how does Vygotsky differ from Piaget or something like that? And they would actually scaffold each other and answer each other's questions. So definitely camaraderie. They were able to bounce ideas off of each other, less pestering from me as far as share with your classmates. They just started to do it, kind of fluidly. And the other thing that I noticed was more engagement and exploration of the topic, which is what I really wanted. Because as we all know, we don't want to lecture at students. Ideally, we want them to take the information and mull it over and analyze it and produce something from it. And that's what they were starting to do. Going on, a couple of other reasons why it worked. Certainly, if you look at learning theory, talking about Vygotsky, Vygotsky was one of our big fans of learning through peers, learning through culture. So my students were able to do that. They were able to be involved in a group where there were people in the group that were very dissimilar to them, a variety of backgrounds, so a variety of perspectives. Most groups reported a sense of belonging, therefore a sense of psychological safety, that peer accountability. Oh my gosh, you guys, I was I mean, a little tear formed in my eye when I heard a group one day say, well, where's so-and-so? They're supposed to be here. We're going to contact them. I mean, they got on it and were like, hey, where are you? And then they were like, oh, he's just running late. Oh, that was so wonderful. It was not me, running after people saying, please, please come to class. And it gave me a lot of breaks. It gave me a lot of breaks. The students were able to work on problems, work on case studies. They were able to analyze role play. They were able to do role plays and stuff like that. One time I sent them out to do a peer observation and then come back. And it's yeah, so overall, for me, it was a joy to see them so engaged in their learning. Now, was this perfect? No. So going on to the next slide, let's talk. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot I added this. This is from the survey that I gave them at the end of the semester. What did you enjoy most about working in their small learning community? You can see some of the things there. Honestly, here's one, nothing. What do you enjoy most? Nothing, nothing, not a thing. But for the most part, you can see some of the themes there, making new friends, being able to share, discussions, differing perspectives, and so forth. Now for the challenges. When students added or dropped late, there was sometimes some reshuffling, particularly early in the semester. Not every group was cohesive. For the most part, the groups got along really well. But again, nothing is ever perfect. So there were some groups that were just very quiet that I really would, sometimes I'd send my TA over to kind of help stimulate conversation within the group. Sometimes there were some personality mismatches, and some people just didn't like it, and so they didn't show up. So if I were, when I do this again next spring, I will talk more about clear expectations about participation and probably go beyond the peer accountability to do something a little more accountable on my end. The other thing that I learned, I would have smaller groups. So I was thinking, okay, a larger group might be a little better in case we do have those chronically absent students. There'd still be a core group. So my groups were about 6 or 7. I would probably make them smaller because in some cases, even in a group of 7, people can still feel lost. So that's another thing that I will change. At the end of the day, though, about 70% of the class said that they enjoyed their small learning community or mostly enjoyed. And 58% said that working in a group increased their motivation for the course. So if you plan on using small learning communities for your large lecture, it's going to be a lot of work up front. But as I tell my students, have future you thank present you with a little upfront planning. And of course, hats off to ChatGPT. It is possible to create a small learning environment. With that is a good segue to book club. Are there any questions, though, about the small learning communities before I talk about book club? Or have you successfully incorporated small groups into a large lecture? Questions or comments?
I have a question, Bonnie. So there were no grades attached to showing up and participating. Like this was just all voluntary, them being in their group and discussing and being active. Is that right?
That's a great question because I did not clarify that.
Okay.
Some of the things that they did as a group, it was non-graded. It was show up, discuss. I think the observation assignment where I had them leave, I don't think I had points associated with that. Some things were graded though. So there were times when I gave the groups a case study, I would let them know ahead of time, hey, if you're planning on skipping tomorrow, that might not be the best day because we might have a case study for points. So some of their work was graded. But since it was a group contribution, for me, it was much easier than grading 147 specific, individual submissions. Since GTAs primarily support students during lab, would it be appropriate to incorporate some of these activities into our lab sections? Yes. Yes, absolutely. Now, as far as course coordinators, I'm not. Yes, I would think so. I would think it would be appropriate to first contact the course coordinator, but certainly, particularly during labs, because yeah, I mean, that is definitely working together for a common goal in a lab setting. If you find the same person talking every time for a group, do you ask someone else? Yes. Yes. So what I would do, and I had a couple TAs in the class, they would help me with this. If we had like a discussion-based section in the class or something like that, we would kind of go around and help facilitate discussion because to your point, sometimes there are those folks in any given group that like to dominate and hear themselves talk. So we would sometimes kind of scaffold that a little bit. The other thing I would sometimes do is tell them, okay, 2 minutes. Each of you, in your group, discuss this. Each of you have 2 minutes. Someone be the timekeeper or something like that. Did I get all of the questions? And that's a good point, Peggy. You could run it by the coordinator as a courtesy, but active learning applies to all learning as long as it doesn't interfere with the curriculum. Yes, yes. Okay, well, let's talk about book club. Now, I did not incorporate a book club into my small learning community this past semester, the spring semester. This is something that I've done in other classes, primarily at my other institution, which was, that small private liberal arts institution. Could this be utilized in a large lecture format, though? Yes. As part of an active learning community or as just kind of a standalone, part of assessment. So book club is something that I started doing years ago when I realized, y'all, I don't know if y'all know this. Did you know that our students don't read the textbook? Did you guys know this? They don't read it.
Yes,
don't.
they don't. You're right.
They don't. And then sometimes they lie about it. And then sometimes they're just very upfront. They're like, oh yeah, no, I started to and realized I don't have time for that. So I realized they needed more bite-sized, options. So with book club, and I'd call it like book club Friday or book club Thursday. I'd have it toward the end of the week and it would be a weekly part of the class. So they knew, okay, starting in February, every Friday is going to be book club Friday, or in the fall semester, if it's a Tuesday, Thursday class, every Thursday, it's going to be book club Thursday. So what I would do with my book club is I would select a book that was appropriate, was definitely not anything. In psychology, it can be really easy to fall into like pop psychology books and stuff like that. So I made sure that they were credible, distinguished authors, that sort of stuff. But I would pick something that was small. Here are some examples of books that I've used in various classes for my developmental classes, my cognitive classes, and now my clinical counseling class. Students don't read, but they view these books through a different lens. So, taking this for an example, now this is not an actual book. I don't know if you can see me in the video or not, but this is an example of like how big these books are. They are not overly meaty. It hits differently than a textbook, but it can still have some of that same information. So when we have a book club, students read the chapter, and they do have to read because they can't discuss if they don't read. So how does it work? So when we're talking about our small groups, whether it's through learning communities or just book club groups. I would divide the students into small consistent groups. I would assign reading like chapter 1 this Friday, chapter 2 the following Friday. And then I would provide guided questions because let's face it, we all know if we tell our students, hey, read a chapter and then discuss it for the hour, that's not going to go very far. So I would provide them with guiding questions. And I think I gave y'all, Shelley, did we post the material as far as, I think I gave you some of the questions that I utilized.
Yes. I don't know if we can put that in the chat. We can definitely email it to people afterwards. So,
okay.
Yeah.
And I would always provide more questions than I thought they would need in case they ran out of time. So, and speaking of time, I'll hurry to the next slide. Here's why I really like book club. It gave them much of the same information as the textbook. However, it was viewed as more bite-sized. Now, let me be very clear. It did not take the place of assessment like exams, and they did have a textbook in addition to that was optional. The book club, though, what I noticed was students tend to view the readings and the books in general more as professional development, more as how can this help me in my future career? So they engaged more meaningfully with it. The club also seems to support autonomy, relatedness, and competence. So, autonomy, even though I gave them a list of guiding questions, they could decide, how there was nothing to turn in. I graded them based on how much I was hearing this. And I would tell them, I'd say, there's nothing to turn in, there's nothing to type, but I want this. I want to hear you. And I would go around and I'd listen in. I want you to discuss. The autonomy comes in, they could decide what questions they wanted to linger over, if there were offshoots that were relevant, where that would sometimes take them. Now, again, I would have to make sure, because again, some people do like to dominate. So that was sometimes a matter of, well, let's hear from, you've been kind of quiet. What are your thoughts on this question or something like that? And there were occasions where we'd have to make sure that group stayed on topic. For the most part, though, they did. And I think that really speaks to the relatedness they were able to discuss with peers. And then finally, the competence. They developed practice speaking in front of peers, which a lot of students need, rather than doing a large presentation in front of an entire class, just speaking about a given topic with their small group. A lot of students reported more confidence in themselves as a student and as a speaker. So going on, it is easy to adapt to different disciplines. So I'm psychology, and of course, there's a variety of things you can talk about when it comes to psychology. But if you're in business, maybe you could adopt a book focused on leadership or something like that. You can see the different ideas here. Learning, memory, certainly that's appropriate for teaching. Biology, there's so much information out there as far as anything from the gut microbiome to, do trees actually talk to each other? So it really is highly adaptable. And then as far as tips for success, it is important to make sure, the books are credible. Again, we don't want to, delve into anything that isn't empirical in nature. Definitely discuss structured discussion prompts. We would love it, right, if our students just naturally engaged in, this inquiry and discussion of the topic. No, they don't. They don't. They need some guiding prompts. I did a lot of visiting groups, but going back to how is this low lift? The groups ran themselves. I just kind of facilitated. And then each class session, I would end with a whole class debrief where we would bring it back together and talk about themes as a whole. And credit was through participation. As long as they were doing this, as long as they were discussing, they got credit. They got full credit. Okay, that was a lot. And, we're talking about don't stand in front of students and lecture at them. And that is just what I did to y'all. So apologies for that. But Peggy, I know you had a few more things to incorporate as far as use of books.
Yeah. I'll keep it short. Shelley, do you mind putting it back in the big view? I think it's still in the...
It's stuck. It won't let me.
Oh, no worries. Okay, I'll keep it
I'm
short.
Sorry, I apologize.
So you're good. I'm a literacy professor. I love book club. I have gotten a grant. I got a grant years ago from the Sustainability Committee and got all these books on sustainability for my pre-service teachers. And we did tons of book club. I loved it. One of the constraints at UTA for on-campus teaching for book club is sometimes our classrooms are very crowded and it's really hard we can't move the seats. They're bolted down. So I had literally had students out in the hallway and even in the stairwell. So that's one constraint with book club. I will say that. I think as we, get more flexible with our classroom space that we can do more things like this, but just one caveat for that. Yeah, they loved talking about it. The idea of choice, so giving them choices for books is great. And then what I had them do was just fill out a voting form, and so they put their preferences. That's when I provided the book. Now, if they are purchasing the book, they can also get the book at their library if it's, if cost is something. And then, so then they brought notes to the book club. I had to provide a lot of structure for it, even though they were in a class on elementary literacy. Some of them had never been in a book club. And so just helping support them is really important. And they read children's books in my class because it was elementary literacy. That's all I have to say. There's a link in the chat, I think from Columbia University on tips. So yeah, last part of this, and then we'll wrap up.
Yes, and I do want to apologize if my computer laptop decided to freak out. I don't know why I can't share full screen, but I did want to mention a few other things that are probably best left to talk about in a different session. But if you do not know about special collections and archives, the Fab Lab, open educational resources, or experiential learning opportunities, those are other ways to get your students involved and active learning in the classroom during class. I encourage you to explore those options. It's really enhanced my teaching, and I just can't say enough great things about it. I would also encourage you to reach out to, I know I saw Kim Brewer and Karishma Chatterjee on here. They have both involved their students in creating OER, open educational resources. So reach out to them about how you can get students more involved in their learning process. And we will share those links in the chat. So before we leave, does anyone want to share what you're going to try with your students or something you have tried? Because again, I love learning from other people. We all love learning from each other. So if anyone wants to share or have ideas. No.
I was getting ready to ask a question, but it looks like but it looks like someone raised their hand, so I will.
Okay, yes, go ahead.
Oh, you can go ahead with your question. I'll wait.
I was just going to ask if anyone had already utilized small groups, but it looks like, we do have at least one response. So, yeah.
Okay, great. And someone had a question?
Oh, I was just gonna mention I teach a pathophysiology nursing course, and it's very content heavy. We lecture for 3 hours straight, so you can only imagine. It is a lot. I mean, we take a break every hour, but anyway, I'm trying to figure out ways to make it more engaging with students. And so I think, say I present a disease process, I may put people in small groups and give them each a disease process and say, okay, you 2 out of the 4 people come up with the signs and symptoms, and then the other 2 come up with treatments, and then discuss out loud in front, of the group. So maybe that would just be a way to break up the content, make it more interactive.
Yes, I like that. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. You could even
set a timer for yourself, like every so often.
Yeah, that's great.
That's a great idea. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Let me just remind you, we have another session coming up July 29th. This is a summer reading, listening, and idea exchange. So again, a lot more interactive, getting us prepared for the fall semester. So we hope that you all will join us for that. You can register there. And then we have the feedback survey, if you all would fill that out. But yeah, if anyone has anything else that you would like to ask or comment on, we're here. But yeah. Peggy or Beth or Nikisha, do you all have anything?
No, we encourage you to email the slide deck to a colleague, like someone just
Oh,
shared
yeah.
the 3 hour thing. If you know someone else who has the 3 hour lecture challenge, send our slide deck and tell them we talk about this a lot. Try one thing this fall. Just try one new thing, see how it goes, and then ask your students how it went if they have feedback for you.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, thanks
All
for joining
right.
everyone in the
Yeah,
summer.
thank you all.
You all get extra credit for joining in the summer.
Yes, and if anyone has ideas you want to share or questions, please reach out to Sertle. And if we don't have the answers, we can direct you to someone who can help you. So yeah, thank you all. I hope you have a great rest of your summer.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Join us for our last session on the 29th. Thanks, Shelley.